Mandatory evacuations underway as Florida braces for Hurricane Ian. Hundreds of thousands ordered to evacuate on Florida's west coast. Watches and warnings in effect. All of Florida under a state of emergency. Ian rapidly intensifying, now a Category 2 storm with 100-mile-an-hour winds. The impact potentially catastrophic. Up to 20 inches of rain. Al Roker with the track. Also tonight, the terrifying video, a gunman opening fire at a military recruitment office in Russia as backlash to Vladimir Putin's war draft grows. And news about former NSA contractor turned whistleblower Edward Snowden, what Putin has now granted him. Shots fired inside a Chicago police station, how a SWAT training session took a very real turn. New fallout from the welfare scandal with ties to Brett Favre. What his newly revealed text messages with a former governor show. Our NBC News exclusive ahead of the DEA with a new warning for parents about deadly opioids made to look like candy. The danger for children. The mission right out of the movies. NASA aiming tonight to smash a spacecraft into an asteroid millions of miles from Earth. How it could one day save humanity. And a musical first for the U.S. military inspiring America.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. As we join you tonight, large-scale evacuations are underway in west central Florida. Tampa this evening sitting in the current projected path of Hurricane Ian. The system forecasters have been watching develop for days. Now a Category 2 hurricane and intensifying as it bears down on western Cuba with sustained winds of 100 miles per hour. Expected to make landfall mid to late week somewhere along the Florida Gulf Coast. Right now, heavy traffic on roads leading from the Tampa area where hundreds of thousands are now under mandatory evacuation orders. The rituals of disaster in full motion, a run on food, gas, and supplies underway in many areas. Let's start tonight with the latest tracking update. Al Roker joins us. Al, what are you seeing?
Well, Lester, here is the latest from the National Hurricane Center. As you mentioned, a Category 2 storm, winds 100 miles per hour, 155 miles southeast of the western tip of Cuba, moving northwest at 13 miles per hour. We have hurricane warnings, watches, and tropical storm warnings for much of Florida as we move to the north. 19 million people at risk for those warnings. The path of the storm, here's the good news. The good news is we're going to see some wind shear as this comes closer to landfall, and that will weaken it. The bad news, two bad things. We've got Gulf waters that are upwards of 5 degrees warmer than usual. That fuels the storm, and it's going to slow down about 3 to 4 miles per hour. We can walk that fast, and that's going to bring prolonged rain, wind, and storm surge. In fact, you speak about the winds. You look here, right through Thursday into Friday morning, sustained winds 45 to 60 miles per hour with gusts of up to 90 miles per hour. Storm surge 5 to 10 feet. That could be catastrophic. Upwards of 2 to 4 feet as you get down to the south. And we're looking at upwards of 20 inches of rain, Lester. That is going to be a big, big problem as we move into the week. But we'll continue to track it and fine-tune that track. Lester?
All right, Al, thanks for that update tonight. All of Florida under a state of emergency amid fears the Tampa area could see its first direct hit from a major hurricane in more than a century. Sam Brock is on the ground there.
I want to say something about what you just got through watching. Whenever a society such as ours here in America, or any society, continues to keep being bombarded again and again and again, regardless whether it be intense storms, regardless whether it be drug infestation, regardless whether it be suicides, regardless whether it be gun violence, whenever a society is steadily being bombarded like this, eventually it will wear not only on people's nerves, but on people's pocketbooks. I guarantee you the majority of the people that are having to dismount right now miss possibly a week of work, and that's probably being on a conservative level, depending upon what the storm actually does, in addition to the extra expenses, in addition to buying extra food, and possibly the food either spoiling or they don't have enough food, vice versa. This strains the system pertaining to our elements like you would not even begin to believe. Now, there's no doubt that COVID put a strain on a lot of people's goods and a lot of people's pocketbooks. But every time an incident like this occurs, it doesn't matter if it's a tornado, a hurricane, over eventful deal pertaining to a flooding that recently happened up here in Kentucky, or whatever, it is constantly draining the resources. And whenever you combine that with all the illegal immigrants coming over here, and you combine that with the inadequate rainfall to the degree of it being beneficial for the agriculture community, regardless whether it's here in America or Europe or wherever, then you are going to have not only independent physical as well as financial problems, but eventually it will wear on the system. Now, I realize America had a great system. They basically had an scapegoat pertaining to our Treasury Department that we can depend upon any and every time there's a major event. That way, if it is a big event, the federal government or the state, either or, can declare a state of an emergency, which basically helps out all the insurance companies in that area to the degree that they basically don't have to declare bankruptcy on one particular event. Now, some of your bigger insurance companies like State Farm, Farm Bureau, and all these other ones that already has their treasury built up pertaining to their bank, they can take on a lick like this probably once a month for the rest of the duration of time, and they would still come out all right because they have a way of pulling together in their resources to where if one particular area gets bombarded by a catastrophe, they'll kick in towards helping one another out. But now, if you have an independent insurance company that isn't that big, it can be absolutely devastating to that particular insurance company, depending upon their customer base and depending upon how bad the event actually is. Getting back to the system, getting back to our piggy bank. We got a piggy bank, okay? Russia obviously didn't have that piggy bank. And because they didn't have that piggy bank, it affected the oligarchs over there, not in an indirect way, but a direct way towards them no longer receiving the type of funds or the type of proceeds that they had obviously gotten before COVID, that basically throwed them over the edge to the degree that I truly believe that it was a great motivation excuse that helped them to decide, well, you know what? If they're not going to give it to us, we'll just take it. Well, you know, that sounds good in theory, but at the same time, if you're going to go over there and burn up, blow up, and destroy all their hospitals, roads, bridges, parks, schools, etc., what have you gained? You've gained just basically a mess. You've already turned it into a wasteland. So how is a wasteland going to help you pertaining to your country towards you getting paid back? One of the excuses with Poisonous Putin was that he felt like that his people had gotten shortchanged. that they had gotten the bad end of the stick pertaining to not only what happened in 1989 up into 1991, whenever the original Russia government fell, but throughout the years, obviously, they have been mismanaging themselves towards too much greed. And then whenever COVID come along, it threw them completely upside down. Well, there's a lot of countries just like Russia. They don't have that piggy bank. They don't have that treasury. And so many of them right now are suffering endlessly, and I'm just afraid that if you combine one event on top of another event on top of another event, like what's fixing to happen this winter, possibly over in the Poland, Germany, Ukraine, United Nations, Sweden area, pertaining to the natural gas being as high as it is, and the food being as high as it is. Once more, one thing strains the system a little bit more each and every time. It strains the resources. As the resources are being strained, the demand goes up. As the demand goes up, the price goes up. As the price goes up, it's steadily squeezing people out and down, and they're sifting through the cracks. But now, eventually, whenever enough people sift through those same cracks, and enough people has to either become homeless, or they declare bankruptcy, or there's such of a massive problem, then it not only affects some of us, but then it starts affecting all of us. I am pretty sure the chain of events that's going to happen from here throughout the winter are going to throw a great deal of countries into total chaos, and even the United States of America will be forced to have to make decisions towards whether or not their piggy bank is still going to be available, and their graffiti money that they steadily keep printing every day is going to have the same face value to it after the storm is over with versus where we are right now. Now, the feds can say whatever they want to about raising the interest rate and saying that it don't have a backfiring effect upon the middle class, because it does. It really does. It really don't affect the poor class all that much. It does affect them a little bit. But the poor class is already poor to begin with. The poor class, odds are, ain't going to go out here and buy a brand new house or a brand new car. So they don't have to worry about those inflation interest rates like the mid class, because the mid class are the ones that's out there working, and the mid class are those that's making anywhere from, let's say, $60,000, $85,000 a year to some of them a couple million. And I know the people making a couple million probably don't consider themselves as being mid-class, but most of the time, by they get through paying out all their tuitions or all their insurances, like the doctors have to be out like $500,000 every year just on lawsuit insurances pertaining to malpractice suits. And of course, by the time they get through paying for their schooling and get through paying for this and paying for that, even though they made $2 million a year, they've actually only made maybe $400,000 or $500,000 when it's all said and done with, because Uncle Sam's going to get his part, the hospital are going to get their part, the school is going to get their part, the government's going to get their part, everybody's going to get their part. It's kind of like a ball player that makes $16 million, gets signed up on a $16 million contract for 3 years. Sounds like a lot of money, but whenever it's all said and done with, whenever you get through paying this one and that one and that one and this one and this one and that one, at the end of the term, the ball player didn't make nearly the amount of money as you think that he made. Now, granted, he made a lot of money. He made a lot of money, especially in comparison to most of the poor class and a great deal of the mid class. But to think that he made 16 or 30 million or however many millions of dollars because he signed that contract is only a delusion or an illusion, because in reality he really didn't make that kind of money. You might be asking, where are you going with this? Where I'm going with this, that every time this great nation takes on a lick like this, it usually doesn't cost millions, but billions. It costs billions in lost revenue. It costs billions as far as people having to take out extra loans. It costs billions as far as the loss of property, the loss of jobs, the loss of this, the extra amount of money that it costs to basically shut down a city like Tampa. We as a nation are no doubt a very, very strong nation in comparison to the majority of the nations out there that are now growing in leaps and bounds, and to some degree, 2 or 3 of them out there has either matched or even exceeded what our grand revenue is pertaining to our worth, because they have been pushing themselves to the letter edge to the point that they have exceeded all expectations, to the degree that some of these countries like China and some of the other places have done very, very well for themselves. But once more, odds are they don't have that piggy bank. They don't have that treasury. You see, whenever that treasury was set up, it was set up to help not just part of the people, but all the people. And a great deal of people that are already in that middle league category can basically take the blow that they have received, regardless whether it's a fire, flood, tornado, hurricane, earthquake, sickness, pandemic, or whatever. They can take it and roll with the punches and keep going. But I guarantee you, those same people will still be pulling on the piggy bank. They'll still be trying to line their pockets with free money and all the other amenities that comes along with being a part of a great nation such as America truly is. Eventually, because of the hits, because of the crookedness, because of those that could be lenient on the system but chooses not to be, this system will fail. And great shall be the fall of it whenever it does. I don't know how many more licks that we can take. I know that we almost owe as much money on an international scale as what we're actually worth. I don't know how much longer that this can continue on before somebody either figures out a new system, or we go ahead and collapse and fold, and then it's rough on everybody, including the 3%ers and possibly even the 1%ers, and those that thought that they could take on this lick, but inevitably are not going to be. But just like all the wasted resources, you got people that's wasting tires right now. You got people that's wasting gas. You got people that's wasting time. You got people that has bought more groceries than possibly what they'll ever need, and water, that will either go unattended or that would just go to waste. We are one of the most wastefulest nations on the planet. But even being a great planet such as we are, eventually those amenities will come to an end, or they will be trimmed down to the point that it will be not as plentiful as what they are. And of course, like I said a while ago, everything is based around supply and demand. Anybody knows that. And whenever you have more of a demand than you have a supply, well, then naturally the price is going to go up, because you're going to have people that's going to take advantage of that situation. Just like what occurred with the petroleum oil products, that felt like that they could do not only America this way again and again and again, but the whole world, that has now set the world in a trajectory of either hard times ahead or total failure. I still believe that with the grace of God and with the help of God, and only by God, can we, as not only a country with such great wealth, but we as mortals here upon to the planet, can still back this up, rewind the clock, re-overhaul the system, and go back, like the Bible talks about, towards getting our system and our lives more perfect, in the effect towards us becoming that productive utopia that God intended for us to be to begin with. In the meantime, we're just going to continue to keep struggling with more hard luck again and again and again. And I realize this year has been a very lenient year whenever it comes to the hurricane season, by and large, towards a direct hit to America. But that does not diminish the fact towards the loss of income that has happened in the agriculture communities, by and large, that I'm going to estimate right here in America has probably exceeded over $500 billion alone. Right here in America, of the loss of revenue pertaining to the agriculture community suffering. Well, whenever you do that again and again and again, and you do that to this country and that country and this country and that country, and you continue to keep doing that, we continue to keep being handed a hard hand because of the works of the devil, because of what he's doing towards coming down in great wrath, because he knoweth his time is short. Eventually, even the strongest of the strong will begin to start weakening, and will begin to start failing. I'm not making a prediction in that degree, because I pray for my country every day. Just like I pray for myself, because I know that I've got weaknesses and I've got fleshly things within my own body that I have to fight routinely from day to day towards the struggles of the temptations of the flesh. They even come to the Lord Jesus Christ in trying to characterize him towards him being something wonderful or great. And he very quickly corrected them whenever they said, good master, or good teacher, or great teacher, great scholar, or whatever. And Jesus would correct them and say, there's only one good, and that's the Creator. Even Jesus knew his place, because he was walking in a fleshly body, even though according to his righteousness exceeded our righteousness probably 1,000 to 1 compared to the incorruption that was going on in his heart and in his mind and in his body during the time that he was walking and talking with us in the body form. You know, I've looked at other men of God and women of God in the Bible that talked about their gloriness or talked about their righteousness. Even Job was considered a righteous man according to the Bible. Noah was considered a righteous man. There was other men and women in the Bible that was considered to be upstanding and to be righteous in the form of the sight of God. But maybe if you and I was living at that time and we personally knew Job, or we personally knew Noah, or we personally knew Saint Teresa, we may beg the difference because of certain things that we conceive towards being right and certain things that we conceive towards it being wrong. I personally believe that honesty is the best policy. And in order for a person to ever become noted as being any righteous form whatsoever, regardless whether it be in the eyes of the Lord or the eyes of the people, is that that person has to be honest. He or she has to be honest. They have to be honest with themselves. They have to be honest with those that are supporting them. And they have to be honest with those that are dependent upon to them. They have to be honest. And whenever it reaches the point that you can no longer be honest, either with yourself or those around you, especially God, well, then you're no longer living a righteous life. What I'm trying to say is this: by watching all these catastrophes continue to keep bombarding the earth towards it being part of the woes that it talks about in Revelations, I have come to the conclusion of believing that what makes a hypocrite, it's not the fact that the sinner continues to deny that he or she is a sinner to the degree that they have put themselves on a pedestal towards being holier than thou or perfect. But it's the fact that they was not willing to be honest with themselves by acknowledging that to themselves and acknowledging that to those around them. In other words, Noah, that landed the ark that everybody knows according to the Bible, turned out to be our pulla drunk, pertaining to him getting drunk after the great flood, in which if that would have been you and I that went through that, I'm pretty sure we would have probably planned out many, many different drunks. But even in Noah's sinful, fleshly weaknesses, God seen through all of that and seen the real Noah in the real sense of his heart and his mind and his spirit. I just pray that God will be able to see that in me, of the struggles that I continue to be profoundly bombarded by, pertaining to the internet and etc. And I just pray that God will be lenient unto all people in all sins, regardless of what that sin may be, because none of us is perfect and we all do make mistakes. But I also pray that in those mistakes we will learn from those mistakes, and that God will deliver us from the bondages of these sinful activities, that we will eventually become that in which what He desires for us to truly be. I have been given a great deal of knowledge in understanding that the wrath of the devil is coming down in great wrath, just as the Scriptures teaches, in the last days, because he knoweth his days is short. Even today, while speaking to a HMO worker, acknowledged the fact that we all have our demons to have to fight, because she actually lived down in the Tampa range. She was calling me up over some questions about my insurance. And I said, well, I wish you the best of luck pertaining to the situation going on down there. And she said, yeah, we all have our demons that we have to fight, don't we? I said, yeah, ours comes in the form of either too hot, not enough rain, or too much rain, or tornadoes up here? She said, yeah, ours comes in the form of hurricanes down there. So no matter where you are, no matter who you are, we all have the same obstacles to basically get over and to go on and stay steadfast towards doing that in which what the Father has called us to do, and not give up, though we may fall flat on our face, in which I have routinely again and again and again, to get up and pull our bootstraps up and go again. And go again. But I'm just letting you know that every time an event like this happens, it stretches our resources. It's not just the water. It's not just all the illegal immigrants. It's not just the heat or too much sun or the planet warming up from underneath our feet. But we are at the point of a despairing moment in history that if we plan on surviving, thriving, and getting over this spot that we're all in on this planet while living, then we're going to have to put aside some of our shame and some of our pride, including myself, by acknowledging that there's only one good, which is not only the Father, but also the Son that sitteth beside the Father, towards striving each and every day towards becoming even as He is and He was during the time that He was with us in the flesh. I pray for the severity of the situation. I pray that it won't just absolutely tear families apart, but I'm pretty sure that it possibly will. Those that was already struggling towards making car payments, those that was already struggling towards making their rent payment, those that was already struggling towards keeping the light bill on, or those that was already struggling with hospitalization problems, or this or that or that or this. I just pray that God will be merciful unto us as sinners, and that we will unify throughout all the hardship in seeing that silver lining, to the degree that we will learn our lessons from all of this and turn from all this. I know this. Whenever I was working at Collision Specialist from the year 1995 up until 2005 in Jackson, Tennessee, there, right either during or suddenly after 9/11, I think it was 202, 203, and maybe 204 and 5, I have never in my life seen so many hurricanes that bombarded Florida again and again and again and again. Insurance companies was begging adjusters from all over the countryside to come down there and help them out towards writing up claims that people was making in regards towards the damages. And I couldn't tell you the amount of estimators that I heard come back. I'm talking about not full-pledged adjusters, but estimators that took off from their job that went down to help during that time, because the demand was so strong that they come back and they would expose the insurance companies towards telling people how that the insurance companies demanded that if you had a $250,000 policy on your home, to try to shave at least $10,000 off of that even though the house was completely destroyed. Even if you didn't do nothing but go outside and find half of a roof and prorate the 2x4s to the degree that maybe 2 foot could have been cut off and make a doghouse out of, this was still 2 foot that would have bettered the insurance companies towards the insurance companies haggling and crawfishing on their commitments with their people. And I really seen that happen in 205 pertaining to the Katrina damage that Halliburton pertaining to Dick Cheney and his family took advantage of at that time. That Dick Cheney went into office valued at $3 million and come out worth about $40 million or more dollars just because of the way that he had swindled people during one of the biggest catastrophes that had ever hit in America at that time, which was Katrina. You might be saying, what are you trying to say, Dennis? I'm trying to say that there's going to be a stopping point. There's going to be an end to all this. I don't know how. I don't know when. I don't know the exact date, because the Bible says that no man knoweth the day nor the hour that the end shall come. But what the Bible does say is that as you shall see the days approaching, indicating that you will be able to tangibly see the things that are occurring because of all the satellite, the internet, telephone, YouTube platforms, other type of social media, etc., that we will literally be able to see as the days are approaching. As I said a while ago, our piggy bank will only go so far. The value of the dollar bill will only go so far. Borrowing from Paul to never intended to pay Paul back, to pay Peter back, knowing that you've taken from Paul, that will eventually catch up with the American people. I don't know when, don't know where, but I know this: you can't take something and make something out of nothing, and money don't grow on trees. And all this graffiti money that America has been producing for itself now for the past 30 some odd years, and it seems like every year we go further and further and further in debt. Now Biden would tell you that last year we actually saved money. Maybe we did to some degree. But I guarantee you these incidences that continue to keep bombarding the American people, either on a small level or a big level, are just tearing and depleting that treasury or that piggy bank that much more every day. In other words, more people are going to become homeless. More people are going to have to foreclose. More people are going to miss out on making their car payments. More people are not going to be able to afford to keep the lights on or pay for that insurance company. And whenever you have a nation that is being torn and ripped apart the way that our nation is being torn and ripped apart right now, you have to identify that something tremendous has and is going on. Especially looking at the way that things has suddenly surfaced since COVID has hit, that has basically imploded countries to the degree that most people here in America can't even begin to comprehend. And we're talking about countries at one time about halfway had their act together. And one of those countries are Russia that I'm talking about. At one time, before COVID hit, Russia about halfway had its act together. But to think that they thought that they was going to be able to go in and take over, just like a bully taking candy from a baby, I think now has backfired on Poisonous Putin to the degree that he realizes that he has obviously bit off more than he can chew. Especially whenever you're fighting up against the free will world that America is basically the leader of, being part of the free world, and thinking that you is going to be able to do this either to the Ukrainians or the pre-Polans or whoever over there, that you is going to be able to do this and get away with it. And now, since his own people is rationally standing up against that type of tyranny, the same way that the people are rising up pertaining to Iran, and the same way that other people are standing up in other countries, I think you can now identify the reason why in 2005, while I was working for an outfit up here in Huntington, Tennessee, give or take about 1 o'clock at night, I handed this individual a Bible tract that I had written out, and me explaining to him that there was such of an abrupt of thunder that was beginning to sound, that now is even getting louder, that I was subsequently going to probably wind up on the news because of it. That it was going to be an explosion of thunder is what I told him. And then I explained to him about the problems going on in my life, and how that the devil had basically targeted me in trying to destroy my life in 2005, which was give or take about 17 years ago. Am I right about that? Or 12 years ago? 2005, 2015, that's 10. 2020, that's 15. 17 years ago, in handing an individual a piece of paper, basically costed me $750,000, my wife, my job, another $1,000 for a bondsman, or no, $5,000 for a bondsman, $1,000 to my attorney, and basically had to move out of the Northwest Tennessee area over in the Middle Tennessee and the Nashville, Tennessee area, just to get away from that in which what had and was attacking me. Just so happens, whenever I moved to Nashville, with it being so busy and so big, it was a little bit more difficult for the wicked demonic sources at that time to pinpoint me and to bring that much more grief and destruction into my life. And of course, whenever I sent the 43rd president a t-shirt in response towards a bloody road ahead, I basically exposed myself, and by me exposing myself, then I did become on the radar, and that's whenever Homeland Security once more illegitimately attacked me because of me trying to warn my people about a bloody road coming, just like I tried to warn my people about these massive, major storms and electrical disturbances to come, that basically I got punished for again and again and again and again and again. So whenever I make the statements that I make towards it couldn't have happened to a better group of people, I want the record to show that not all them people are the people that I'm talking about. I'm only talking about the people that initiated this resistance movement that began in 1980 and 8 during Ronald Reagan's administration, that has helped to put us today where we are. Because if that did not happen, I truly believe that the whole world right now would be experiencing a utopia, a revival, prosperity, all this confusion, all this bickerness, all these weather events, all these horrible shootings and killings and blackmail and drug overdoses and the black plague pertaining to the coronavirus, and ain't no telling us what's coming down the pike next, and pertaining to all the sicknesses that people's already having to become adjusted to. I truly believe that all those things we would not be experiencing right now. But because certain people made certain choices 30 some odd years ago, has helped to put us where we are today. And I feel so sorry for the innocent. I feel so sorry for those that didn't take a part in this resistance movement, that basically I have to live around, breathe, talk, grocery shop, drive, and participate around almost every day of those that could have helped, but sat either with their hands tucked underneath their hips, or they sit back idly by and allowed for an individual to be hunted, stalked, agitated, and almost put to his death because of the commitment that God had given him about the gospel. About the gospel.
Floridians on the move, hoping to avoid disaster after mandatory evacuations were issued in multiple counties for hundreds of thousands of people.
We did not make this decision easily, but the storm poses a serious threat, and we must do everything we can to protect our residents.
The call coming as Tampa projects to see double-digit storm surge, 100-mile-an-hour plus sustained winds. Florida challenged by an aging population with less mobility.
We ask that our long-term care facilities begin their evacuations today. We're already seeing some of our hospitals do that.
Some families now making the decision to hit the road.
I don't know how good of a job that's going to do.
Anna Griggs is evacuating to a hotel.
So, you want some help? Okay.
The mother of 2 teenagers lives blocks from the bay. They're not sure what they'll even return to.
You stand to lose a good chunk of your livelihood if there's damage to this house.
We do, yes.
Is that your biggest concern?
I think it is. It's partly that, but it's also the fact that this is our home.
This is their roots, this is attachment.
Yeah.
And that could be severely damaged, if not destroyed.
Yeah.
Supplies.
And you know, there's probably thousands of people just like her in the middle or low middle class that can probably bounce back because of this. But how many other couples out there or people out there that have already strained their resources to the wit's end, to the point that they have had to open up various credit card accounts just to try to survive and to pay Paul to pay Peter back and do the juggling game as far as trying to utilize their resources. How many people do you think that this will actually be that last and final nail in their coffin towards basically either causing them to become homeless or pushing them over the edge to the point that they basically try or maybe are even successful in taking their own lives? And basically you may say, well, just because you become homeless don't mean that you take your own life. No. What it means is because of the surrounding circumstances has done it for you. You may not put a gun to your head or jump off of a building or slice your wrist or swallow a bunch of pills. But in reality, your life has been ruined. How many people do you think out of the percentage is already struggling because of COVID. They've already had to do this and do that, and they've made arrangements here and borrowed from Paul to pay Peter. I'm going to go as far as to say if there's over 30% of the people in America right now that are late either on their notes, their car payments, or their rent, or all the above, you'll probably be looking at just about the same statistic here. Yeah, they may have enough gas to put 5 gallons down the road and go 100 miles inland, but how many of those cars are you going to see run out of gas because they don't have enough money to either go further or whenever all this is over with to go back? You have people with strained resources that are that close to the edge, especially after COVID, and especially since poisonous Putin and the oil petroleum companies have pulled their little stunt. You got people right now that are just at the point of becoming beggars, hobos, tramps. And of course, most people in general, whenever they see a homeless person, and I'm one of them, whenever I see somebody out here with a sign wanting some extra cash or wanting this or wanting that, one of the first things that most people think of, well, you probably brought it upon yourself, you poor soul. You got involved in the wrong things with the wrong people, and now your world has collapsed around you. Well, that ain't the case in every case. Some of these people have tried and tried and tried to live a good, honest life so that they wouldn't have to resort to crime, so that they wouldn't have to become a beggar or a hobo. And now, because of the surrounding circumstances pertaining to the sorrows that the Bible talks about, now they will be pushed completely over the edge to the point that that same person that was struggling will no longer struggle. Because now they will become homeless, and they will be that person out there with that sign saying, please, can you help me? Please, can you help me? That is where we are as a society, not only here in America, but throughout the world. And you have to ask the question, who and what entity has caused this? And it goes back to the very teachings that I've been telling people about for years, pertaining to the Luciferian Lucifer, that some people, even to this day, want to bow down and worship. To put him on some sort of a pedestal, like he's some sort of a god. And he was never a god. He was never to be imaged as a god. Because Lucifer was a being that got created by God, pertaining to being one of the angels that's no longer one of the angels, but is a defiled, evil, fallen spirit. That does not even come close to being God. Neither nor does he come close to being one of God's holy angels. It's time that America woke up in identifying who their true enemy actually is. And it's not God. Because if God had anything to do with bringing destruction into America, it wouldn't take but one swat, and it would make this hurricane look like a pebble on a gnat's rear end compared to what God can actually do. So please, whenever you hear some of the recordings that I make, I'm not trying to be condemning. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm trying to be as honest about this situation that we are all facing off on, that is becoming more and more realer each and every day and each and every hour and each and every second of the hour towards what's going on. And we have actually been spared by the brunt of it, because those poor people over in Ukraine has not been spared. The people over in Waverly, Tennessee, that lost about 25 lives because of a deluge, they was not spared. The people in eastern Kentucky that recently lost so many homes and lives got destroyed in about 10 counties, they was not spared. The tornadoes that ripped through this area 2 weeks before Christmas last year and killed over 100 people that stayed on the ground for over 250 miles. Those that was in its path was not spared. We are going to have to awaken, and we are going to have to make new pledges, and we are going to have to go back as the Bible talks about, because if not, we are heading towards great tribulation, not just as a nation, but on a global level, that in and of itself could push society over the edge, just like that hobo or that bum or that homeless person, to the degree of saying, you know what? It's no longer worth it. It's no longer worth the fight. It's no longer worth the punishment. It's no longer worth the grief. It's no longer worth the pain and the agony. Let's just take somebody like Poisonous Putin and give out everybody the order towards pressing the nuclear bombs, and let's just end it. Let's take everybody out of their misery. We'll just end it for everybody. That's what bothers me most in understanding where we are right now as a society and where we are as a nuclear society. That if enough of this happens again and again and again, and enough pain and destruction and hardship.
And Sam, we're talking about a lot of people on the move. What does the evacuation look like at this hour?
Lester, just starting behind me is Clearwater and Pinellas County, which began the process tonight of evacuating some 300,000 people, then 400,000 tomorrow. This is the storm is projected to slow down to the rate that you and I walk at, meaning the storm will be sitting here just dumping water and ratcheting up the risk for flooding. Lester?
All right, Sam Brock, thank you. And as Ian marches northwest, a hurricane warning in effect tonight for western Cuba. Guad Venegas is there for us in Havana. And Guad, how serious is the situation there tonight?
Lester, 5 million people in Cuba are under hurricane alert. It's expected to touch down as a Category 3 in the west part of the country. These are winds of 129 miles per hour. We're expecting 6 to 8 inches, maybe 10 inches of rain. Pinar del Rio, this is a province that will get the worst. They have about 500,000 people there, 50,000 already evacuated by the military. We're getting reports that 4 reservoirs in that part of the country are already overflowing. Now, here in Havana, the U.S. Embassy has asked Americans to shelter in place. They shut down today and tomorrow. In fact, the water you're seeing next to me expected to rise and affect some of these buildings in Havana. Lester?
Juan Venegas, thank you. We'll turn now to Russia and the growing backlash to Russian President Vladimir Putin's order to draft 300,000 more troops to fight in Ukraine. As protests grow, a gunman opened fire in a draft office in Siberia today. Aaron McLaughlin now with the video, and we should warn you, the images are disturbing.
Today in eastern Russia, terror. A man opens fire at the military enlistment office as everyone else runs for it. One officer injured, the suspect under arrest. According to local media reports, the suspect was shouting, "No one will go to fight." Troubling signs, the response to Russian President Putin's order sending reservists to the front lines is growing violent. The attack following a rare weekend of protest. From St. Petersburg, with some demonstrators struck by police, to Dagestan, where gunfire went off within the crowd. Thousands risked arrest to rail against mobilization, as many more dodge the draft any way they can. Lines of cars to cross the border into Finland and Georgia. Traffic jams extending for miles, though others are reporting to draft offices. This man saying his mother was unhappy, but what can he do? We have to defend our country. But in Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine tonight, some say young men of draft age are now going missing. Zainish Hussein fled the eastern city of Kherson 3 weeks ago.
They go missing, right? Like, they just drag them out of their homes and take them somewhere.
That claim as Russia is poised to annex occupied areas once the controversial referendum to join Russia, that critics call a sham election, is over toward the end of the week. Tonight in Russia, Edward Snowden was granted citizenship. No response so far from the former NSA contractor who's wanted in the United States, accused of espionage. Lester.
Aaron, thank you. Also in Russia today, a horrific shooting at a school leaving at least 17 people dead, including 11 children. 24 others were wounded. Investigators say the gunman, a 34-year-old former student who was wearing a T-shirt with Nazi symbols, took his own life. No motive has been released. Back home, a shocking incident inside a police station in Chicago. Investigators say a man climbed a fire escape 5 stories to infiltrate the facility while officers were in SWAT training. Police say he entered a room where guns were on a table, grabbed at least 2, and pointed them at officers. The suspect was shot and sustained non-life-threatening injuries. Police say the guns were not loaded with live ammunition, but may have contained training ammo. There is a new twist in a Fleecing of America story we've been reporting on about the misuse of welfare funds in Mississippi. Attorneys for the former governor releasing new text messages with Brett Favre, the NFL legend, caught up in the scandal. Ken Delaney now on what they reveal.
NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre is under growing pressure tonight. Sirius Radio putting his weekly football show on pause, as a new court filing says the former football star waged a campaign to aggressively lobby for millions of dollars from the state welfare agency to finish building a volleyball facility at his alma mater, the University of Southern Mississippi, where his daughter played the sport, and also a football practice facility. New texts show Favre in contact with then-Governor Phil Bryant and other state officials as he pushed to secure funding meant for people in poverty. "I need your influence somehow to get donations and/or sponsorships," Favre texted Bryant in April 2017. Court records show he secured $5 million, but needed more. Even after state auditors began to raise questions, Favre kept lobbying. In September 2019, he texted Bryant that he wanted to name the volleyball complex after the governor. "We obviously need your help big time, and time is working against us," Favre texted. Bryant replied, "We're going to get there, but we have to follow the law. I'm too old for federal prison." The former governor says he did not know officials used millions from the federal welfare program to construct the sports complex. Bryant's former welfare director pleaded guilty to state and federal crimes last week in the growing scandal. He also agreed to cooperate with the FBI, which has been investigating the welfare misspending for 2 years. Tonight, Favre's lawyer tells me his client behaved honorably and did not know the state grants he sought came from federal welfare funds. He noted that former Governor Bryant is not accusing Favre of violating any laws. Favre has not been charged. Lester?
Ken Delaney, and thank you. Now to our NBC News exclusive. They're calling it rainbow fentanyl, potentially deadly opioids made to look like candy. Tonight, the head of the DEA speaking out to our Kate Snow with a warning for parents.
This is on the wall at DEA headquarters in Washington. Thousands of faces gone because of fentanyl.
So you're adding to the wall
every day.
It's overwhelming to see in person.
Now, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle demanding action. Authorities overwhelmed. So many deaths in Los Angeles, the school district is now putting the overdose-reversing drug Narcan in every school, K through 12. DEA Administrator Ann Milgram is deeply concerned about the latest trend, traffickers pushing so-called rainbow fentanyl.
They're making rainbow-colored pills, so all the colors of the rainbow. Why do you think they're doing that? So we believe that they're doing this to get new users, to appeal to younger users. We're finding it all over the social media platforms. It looks like candy, and in fact, some of the drug traffickers have nicknamed it Sweet Tarts, Skittles. It has nothing to do with candy. It has nothing to do with candy, and we should say this as clearly as we possibly can. Many people who are dying from fentanyl poisoning have no idea that they're taking fentanyl.
They've found rainbow fentanyl in 21 states. Milgram says it's a marketing ploy by the cartels.
This is another tactic that they're using to get more fentanyl to more people. The more drugs they can sell, the more addiction they drive, the more profit they make.
She says the DEA knows raw ingredients for fentanyl travel from China to Mexico, and she blames 2 Mexican cartels for producing the drug. In the 4 months between May and September, the DEA seized more than 10 million fake pills containing fentanyl.
That's the equivalent of 36 million, more than 36 million lethal doses of fentanyl.
Enough to kill 36 million people.
Enough to kill 36 million people.
Republicans have been incredibly critical of the border policy. They say all this fentanyl is coming in because of the Biden administration's border policies. What do you say to that?
First of all, we, of course, defer to the Department of Homeland Security that has the responsibility for the border. Our job is to dismantle the cartels, to stop the global trafficking that is happening. We cannot wait. We cannot wait until the fentanyl gets to the border or to the ports to act.
Milgram says she comes to this wall often, a reminder that the job of the DEA is to save lives. Kate Snow, NBC News, Washington.
And you can catch much more of Kate's exclusive with the DEA administrator tomorrow on Today. In 60 seconds, NASA aiming for a cosmic crash, the mission to smack.
It's a move by the demonic spirits coming from the very pits of hell towards wanting to eliminate the good that is already here. That way it crosses reference with what God basically commanded for the wheat to grow with the tares until time of harvest. They want to go ahead.
Ian taking aim at Florida and high.
They want to go ahead and take out the good that's already here. Take out the wheat.
And next year's show will be even bigger and better.
They want to take out the sheep. Take out the sheep. That way, they can just walk right in and take over, and there'll be no resistance. And that way, the devil and the devil's people can have a full house towards being fully in command. Once more, the Bible teaches us that the devil's out to kill, steal, and destroy, not God. God didn't have nothing to do with them fentanyl pills being made and transferred over here in America. That is the devil's work. Those are the demons that's working towards wanting to destroy the good, sound people.
Now our NBC News exclusive. With Hurricane Ian taking aim at Florida and high temperatures hugging the coast, Kerry Sanders with the warning from new heat officers about the sometimes unseen dangers of extreme heat.
Over 100 degrees heat index. One of the hottest NFL tickets Sunday was the Dolphins and Bills game, but not because the matchup was such a nail-biter.
And this heat will get the best of us.
At least 4 Bills players suffered heat exhaustion.
Sometimes the best option is to come in and get another IV.
Doctors say with Hurricane Ian approaching and bottled water in short supply, there is an important game day lesson. When a hurricane hits, power is often knocked out, sometimes for weeks. Mark Malinak remembers enduring 2 weeks without electricity with his family when Hurricane Irma hit 4 years ago.
What was it like just living without AC in Florida? Yeah, it's miserable. I think 2 hours without power is too much. Definitely the house got up into the mid-90s quickly.
Adding to the problem, Florida's hyper-growth.
This is what we might call a concrete jungle.
This is an urban heat island.
In Miami, Jane Gilbert, among the nation's first so-called heat officers, with volunteers placing sensors to keep tabs on how hot it can get.
Extreme heat is the #1 climate-related killer across the country and here locally.
Nationwide heat waves now so common, some communities across the country may categorize and name heat threats the same way hurricanes are named.
All right, let's check and see how hot it is where we are seated, which is 145 degrees.
Oh my God.
When we sit here,
That is quite, I feel it.
yeah, it's too much.
It is. It's not tolerable.
Tonight, a warning to those who do not evacuate. After the wind and the storm surge, the next danger will be the heat. Lester?
All right, Kerry, thanks. Up next, from fife and drum to hip-hop and rap, the new sound of the U.S. Army.
Especially those that are elderly, young, that already has underlying health issues, that all of a sudden has to be exposed to that type of humidity and heat. It's relentless towards what it can do to a person as far as having a heat stroke or even dying. I've never seen such sadness than what I see in the lenses from the Homo sapiens here up onto the planet in the year 2022. The only thing that I know to do is to pray to God. God, be merciful unto us as sinners. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Because these relentless issues that we're facing right now, regardless whether it be fentanyl, candy, gun violence, poisonous Putin, the Ukrainian situation, the remnants of COVID, the remnants of the price of petroleum going up, the remnants of that in which what poisonous Putin has brought up into society. Are great catastrophes like this. There'll be a breaking point. Even with a nation as great and as strong as America, there'll be a breaking point. And I just pray to God every day that before we get to that breaking point, that we will awaken from this stupor that we are in, that we have been basically deceived or bewitched, and that we will turn this around through the power and the unisys of not only ourselves, but by God. Because at this point in time, that's the only thing that's going to save humanity, is God. Not the devil, not the devil's people, not fentanyl, not going out here and committing more crime, not NASA pertaining to their space adventure towards wanting to try to knock out some sort of a comet or a meteor shower. Not even our Treasury Department will save us. The only thing that will save us is God Almighty. I want to see this special that they're going to be bringing out pertaining to our military and see what they're talking about here, because I haven't seen none of this. This is all new. And one may say, well, Dennis, you know that there's always a silver lining, even to a catastrophe like a hurricane, towards putting people back to work and taking all them drowned houses in Dallas and Houston and all them people that got drowned houses in Jackson, Mississippi, and having to rip up all that carpet and replace all that sheetrock. That there's always a silver liner to these hardships towards actually helping society versus hurting them. Well, it may be, but it's a hell of a price to have to pay. And if you don't believe me, you need to go up there and talk to some of them people that lost everything in Waverly, Tennessee, or you need to go over to Kentucky and talk to them people that lost everything that they had because of the deluge, or go out west and talk to some of them people that has gotten their homes burnt down to the ground, and basically their whole geographics now look completely, totally different in comparison to what it did. I mean, who wants to go live in a charred, destructionable area that basically is just full of doom and gloom? That's the reason why I say what I say about the president of Russia. It don't add up. Why would you want to bring that type of destruction to the geographics and the real estate of the Ukrainians if your sole primary purpose was to infiltrate that country and take it back over and use it for the spoils of the Russian good? You're not going to get that by ripping up and tearing up and turning it into a wasteland. That's the reason why I say there's something else in behind Putin doing what he's doing that's on a bigger level. And I guess with everything unfolding the way that it is, we're probably soon going to see if he's willing to cross that threshold in going that far, or if he's willing to accept his losses and back up and retreat. I mean, once you become suicidal and you have that type of power, and you know that you can take a great deal of people with you, as you yourself are going to be going out in a bang, the blood of the innocent will fall upon to the feet of those that will be found guilty in the first degree, that there will be a special place in hell for people like Hitler and for people like Putin and for other oligarchs that have been unfair, barbaric, and cruel to other people, that they will give 100% of account for the things that they have either done or did not do that they know that they should have done. These people, under the leadership of God, not the leadership of man, but under the leadership of God, will be held accountable.
Finally, tonight is a tradition as storied as the Army itself. Now the Army Band is changing its tune. Here's Aaron Gilchrist.
The United States Army Field Band is no stranger to the world stage. The Field Band has been playing concerts and connecting the public to the Army for more than 75 years, honoring soldiers and veterans through music. The notable Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy has never sounded like this. Rappers Nicholas Feemster and Lamar Riddick just over a year ago answered a job posting by the Army Field Band looking to add hip-hop artists to its ranks.
How does it feel to be the first?
To be here and to be able to be a part of such a great organization that was forward-thinking enough to even bring on rappers is it's a great blessing. I think people get caught up in the first and lose the quality. So we're going to be focused on making sure we're doing a good job with that title. You can talk about a multitude of different things with hip-hop music.
After months of basic training, Feimster and Riddick are now full-time members of the Army and its field band, making their debut in front of a world audience in Scotland at the Edinburgh Military Tattoo last month.
Heck yeah! We hit that walkway. Me and him kind of just gave each other like a little, and we're just like, it's showtime. That's stuff that I prayed for when I was younger. So I was glad to be there.
The Army striking a new chord with these trailblazers leading the way.
Sometimes things just take time, but it's here now, and we're here to stay.
Aaron Gilchrist, NBC News, Fort Meade, Maryland.
And that's Nightly News for this Monday. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
Physical protection by some of the militia groups that have since been charged with seditious conspiracy. So we know that he was in communication with them. And I think the question is, what was the nature of that communication? And then also, you know, he was the architect of this whole Stop the Steal movement. I mean, actually, he coined this back in 2016 in anticipation of that election. So this has been a long con, and so I'm not surprised that, you know, that he had this formulated in his mind. And in many ways, I would say that I expect his role to be not very different than what surfaced in the Mueller investigation, where he was a linchpin between... Yes. You know, WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign. I mean, he's always kind of in the center, getting his hands dirty, and that's where I guess he loves to be. And I will be interested to see what the committee has uncovered with regard to his role.
It's a great point, because we've already been through this movie once before, in which Stone plays this kind of sort of plausible deniability off-book role and informal.
You know, whenever you hear the same thing again and again and again, and you know what the end results are pertaining to what happened January the 6th, it gets old. It gets old. And it was a very, very bold move that certain individuals here in the United States should be held accountable for the potential bloodbath that they could have been a part of, that fortunately God and God alone stopped, pertaining to the January 6th riots. Because if the truth be known, those catastrophic events could have turned into an episode that would have turned this great nation totally upside down in comparison to us already being halfway torn apart and upside down, but would have basically finished us off. And of course, I've said this again, and I'll say it again. What better tactic that our adversary could have played off on by taking the good old USA and causing the people to basically turn against themselves to the point that they start fighting amongst themselves and weaken themselves to the point that then our enemy, our adversary, would basically just walk in and take us over. If we cannot identify what is going on in the depth that it's going on in, we are only going to grow deeper and deeper and deeper in despair. Because the Bible is very clear in acknowledging that the devil, which is Lucifer that got kicked out of heaven, is out to kill, steal, and destroy in any method, in any way, and any form that he can. And what I have been witnessing for the past 45 minutes to an hour pertaining to all these other subjects is exactly, just exactly that. The destruction that the devil has brought up into the world is unlike anything that I can begin to imagine that is happening to not just America, but to the world.
Down that road to Baidoa is Somalia's hungry interior. A grueling journey through jungle, eventually revealing a rebel base in Myanmar. The demonstrators holding the Lebanese government itself is really a chimera. It is hopeless and it's a sort of joke. The Russian military is reportedly consolidating and planning to push in further into the city. This is the result of one single blast. Devastating levels of artillery. Large numbers of refugees, of evacuees, getting ready to get on those flights. It is the tragedy of Afghanistan itself. I'm Sam Kailin, and this is CNN. I'm Max Foster at Buckingham Palace in London. This is CNN.
See what I'm saying? As far as the wear and tear, the destruction that's going on all over the world right now. So this added hurricane that's brewing down south is going to just be another additive contributor to exactly that. As I was saying a while ago, I know that I'm not perfect. Just like whenever they come to Christ and said, good master, and he corrected them and he said, for there's only one good, and that's God. I know that I have imperfections, and I know that I have inadequacies towards lining up sometimes with God. But I also know that the teachings of Jesus Christ gives me a parachute to the degree that he's going to love me just as much before, during, and after, especially if I'm truly one of his. He may not love the things that I've done, or the things that I've partaken in, or the things that others have partaken in, but he still loves us. He's still knocking on that door. He's still saying, let me in, let me in. For it says that he hath opened a door that no man can shut, not even the government of the United States. So please, we pray that our words will be well taken pertaining to the events at hand, and that these dreamers pertaining to all their money and wealth, by thinking that they're going to be able to stop something that's already been written in the initial realm of happening to begin with. Don't set your sights so much on what NASA either has done or is doing, but set your sights on God. Please watch.
On board the craft as it approached the asteroid, as well as a very excited mission control.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow. I'm waiting for visual confirmation.
All right. We got it? Ready?
understanding of planetary defense.
Those are some pretty jazz scientists right there. I'm joined now by legendary, yeah, right? Legendary astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson of the American Museum of Natural History joins me now. He's also author of the new book, Starry Messenger, Cosmic Perspectives on Civilization.
Now, there's no doubt what that they have achieved is, in fact, amazing towards being able to hit a target doing probably 20,000 miles an hour in space, millions and millions and millions of miles away. That in and of itself is a marvel, an absolute marvel. And something no bigger than what I'm thinking that this was. Maybe they could have had some sort of a direct link in diverting it from destroying the planet Earth if it was small enough. But if it's like what the Bible talks about as far as wormwood, that the way I understand it will be an extremely, extremely big boulder, possibly even the size of Texas, that will hit the earth, that will cause a third of the earth to perish. Once more, if it is written, if it is documented, if it is recorded, if it is already being envisioned of it occurring, it will occur. It will occur. Now, granted, they can spend all the hundreds of millions of dollars that they want in this type of study, or this type of entrepreneurship. But whenever it's all said and done with, this is my point. Would you rather put your faith in NASA, or would you rather put your faith in God, knowing that your soul, your spirit, your conscience, your very being will live forever, even though the body may perish?
Oh, hitting this asteroid was successful. It hit what it was aiming at, but what will NASA determine to figure out how successful it was, if it worked to push this asteroid away?
So it's not an isolated asteroid. It's a moonlet of a much larger asteroid. And they actually have a little gravitational dance that they do where the moonlet orbits the larger asteroid. And so a lot of thought went into what would be the best way to test if we can deflect an asteroid. And once you have a very well calculated and measured orbit, if you now give it a nudge, it was a head-on collision in this case, then you can then see what has happened to the orbit after that collision. And so it's a bit brilliantly conceived and designed. I just think we should have been doing this decades ago.
So the part that I can't get past is that we need a planetary defense system. This is a dry run to test technology in case an asteroid is headed to Earth that poses a threat to humankind. You know, what's the chance of that actually happening?
Well, you can bet that if the dinosaurs had NASA, they would have deflected that asteroid that took them out 65 million years ago. So I don't want to be the laughing stock of the galaxy to be the only species to not only be smart enough to be able to deflect an asteroid, have a space program in place to do so, and then not do so and go extinct because of it. That would just be embarrassing, I think, for me as a species. So yeah, these are baby steps right now just to see if it works. All right.
It's kind of like having a storm shelter or somebody with a firearm protecting their home. You rather have it and never need it than to need it and not have it. I understand what he's saying, and it's a very, very enchanting, good thing that humanity has evolved to the point that we can actually do something like this. It's a milestone. It's a milestone in the achievements of NASA pertaining to aviation and Space Force that possibly could have some sort of a bearing in some of the smaller asteroids, but something the size of Texas, if it was heading this way, I don't think all the nuclear bombs going off at one time would be able to slow, stop, or eliminate the damage that was going to be hitting the planet Earth. And if anything, it would spread it out, in which they've already discussed this. If anything, it would spread it, the debris out to the point that it could possibly do more damage with the debris than it would have been if you'd have just left it alone and let it hit the ocean and sunk down 4 miles into the ocean and caused a massive tidal wave, which either or is going to be horribly, horribly sad for the inhabitants here upon to the earth. And I guess in a way this does offer somewhat of a hopeful situation, to where we're just not completely defenseless in the case of something like this occurring. But you got to look at it logically, that if the Bible has already pre-predicted it towards what's going to happen to the planet, as far as God coming back and destroying the old world to recreate a new world and a new heaven, then all of our attempts, I hate to say, you can spend all the trillions and trillions of dollars that you want to on this particular project, but you're still not going to succeed in stopping that in which what God has already put in place to occur.
All right, to see if we have the power to do this. And then when the big one comes, you want to make sure that there's enough of these practice runs that, in fact, we would end up succeeding. Notice it's deflecting, it's not blowing it out of the sky, as in so many cinematic scenarios have portrayed. You know, in America, we're good at blowing stuff up and less good at knowing where the pieces go afterwards. So a deflected asteroid is far more sensible in what it would require to protect our species.
I like the fact that embarrassment is high on your list of concerns during an extinction event. It may be a little bit lower on my list there, but I do appreciate that you have that feeling as an astrophysicist. So if an asteroid were headed to Earth, would NASA be able to replicate this mission, or would it tailor what it does to a specific threat?
Yeah, of course you'd have to tailor it. And the catch here is you want to discover the threat as early as possible. So it might be we get an asteroid, then 1,000 orbits from now it might hit Earth. Well, then maybe that's early enough so that you just nudge it maybe 1 centimeter per second to the left or to the right, all right, in some direction that it's not otherwise headed. And once you give it that extra speed, that speed just accumulates in the deflection angle, and you can, with relatively little investment of energy, have an asteroid completely miss Earth if you get it early enough. And so a big effort of NASA now is cataloging the asteroids that are what we call near-Earth threats, near-Earth objects. And once you get a full catalog of those, then you track them. And once you track them and you get one discovered, that's when you go into effect. But I'd rather we had this ready even before we discover such a threat. I feel better about it.
I feel better. I feel better just talking to you about it. Neil deGrasse Tyson, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Always a pleasure.
And by the way, that movie, Don't Look Up? To me, that was a documentary, so I worry about that.
Right.
Where everyone was in denial.
Neil, thank you very much. And a reminder, Neil's new book, Starry Messenger, Cosmic Perspectives on Civilization, is coming out.
My son wanted me to look at that movie, Don't Look Up. I've looked at different parts of it. I haven't looked at the whole thing. But he said it was a dramatized movie that probably is in actual facts towards how that the human race would actually respond and react pertaining to something like that occurring. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I'm pretty sure it's probably as good as maybe the movie that other Hollywood scripts has put out pertaining to the doomsday scenarios. It's a good thought. It really is. It sounds good in theory. It really does. And it's a great accomplishment for the engineers of NASA of them being able to basically just hit something like this, aim at it and hit it with it being this far away. And it's good to be hopeful rather than non-hopeful over the worst case scenario. Like I said a while ago, I rather look at this in the same way as having a storm shelter or a home having a firearm that you hope to God that you never have to use. But I'd rather have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And what would we be able to say to those in a despairingly moment years from now if we could have modified this and perfected it to the degree that we could have caused it to have spared and saved millions upon millions of lives, but we did not at least give it a fair chance or a shake towards doing so. By me saying all that, I want to say God bless America in her endeavors. This just basically proves that one small step for humanity and one great step for whatever the words was of the great astronaut that landed on the moon. It just proves that theory towards we as a society are still moving forward in our endeavors. And who knows where it may lead. You throw the dice, you see where they land. You're never going to know where they land if you don't never throw them. It's kind of like winning the lotto. How can you expect to win the lotto if you don't never play it? God bless America. God bless America's endeavors. Good luck to each and every one of us. And ending on this note, we want to say thank you. And God bless and shalom.